with the blue screen of death behind us. I'm Adam Sanford, and I'm from Cal State Dominguez Hills. And what we're looking at today is, with restorative justice, one of the things that we need to think about is compassion. We need to be compassionate not just to the victims, but to some extent the offenders. And we put a lot of demands on offenders to be accountable, right? We have certain ways in which we allow them to not be accountable. For example, if you can show that you're insane, we don't hold you accountable. Nowadays, a lot of work has been done on people who have ADHD or OCD, that they don't have the ability to control their impulses. We all know that offenders have problems with impulse control and irritability and sensation seeking that I just taught this class. And so it's hard for us to be compassionate when we see offenders acting like they're 6. But there are also other reasons, even if the person does not have a documented learning disability or a mental disorder, where they may act like they're 3 or 4. They may act impulsive, and they may make their decisions in short term rather than long term. And this concept is called celerity, which is time to consequence. But when you look at the literature that is talking about how do we stop people from committing crimes, and how do we demotivate crime, it all tends to be looking at how many long-term consequences can we pile on people so that they will stop. You know, if you make the cost big enough, then they won't commit the crime because the rewards won't be good enough. This is basic Beccaria from the original classical school of criminology, right? And it's not working. Deterrence theory has been categorically shown not to work, and yet we keep using it, and we base policy on it, and we get mad when people don't obey. And then we make the pie bigger. We say, okay, instead of getting 12 years in jail, we're going to give you 25. And we still have people committing the same crime over and over and over. Okay? One of the possible reasons for this is that we are imposing long-term consequences and not noticing that the consequences we're reacting to when we impose those consequences are short-term. And it's all about which consequence are we talking about when we say celerity, which is time to consequence. That's why my title is Time to Which Consequence. So traditional explanations for deviance when we're talking about demotivating deviance before it happens are largely 2 groups. There's deterrence theory and there's legitimacy theory. And deterrence theory tends to talk about long-term instrumental consequences, meaning the institution is going to impose a consequence, and once you've got that consequence, it lasts a long time, and it may never resolve. Okay? Legitimacy theory suggests normative consequences, group pressure, things like ostracism and shunning and so forth, to bring people back in line with how they should be. But the missing dimension is, which consequence are we talking about? Because we all know if we catch our 2-year-old or our 3-year-old with their hand in the cookie jar and we say, no, Tommy, he won't do that again. But if we don't catch him until 2 days later when we notice that the cookie jar has gone from 80 cookies in it to 30 cookies in it, and then we see that there's crumbs on Tommy's face, and then we say, no, it's 2 days after he grabbed the cookies, we know that the longer it takes for the consequence to hit, the less effective it is, right? So I will go over quickly traditional explanations for deterrence in terms of demotivating people from committing the crime in the first place. And then I will talk about celerity as the missing dimension. I'll give you a little bit of information on literature on lawbreakers, deviants who break the law. But then I'm going to give you my new data on people who make law, who want law enacted. And when I say lawmaker, I'm not talking about politicians. I'm talking about you and me. We do a citizen initiative where we petition our lawmakers, make these laws and make this not legal anymore, make this criminal. Okay? And then I'm going to talk about the common threads between how lawbreakers make their decisions to deviate and how lawmakers make their decisions to make things criminal. From this point, I will talk a little bit about celerity and deviance and how we can use the idea of time to consequence when we are stopping people, or rather, how we can't, but why. The literature has not been clear on why it will not work as a thing that we can measure and use. And then I'll talk just for a second about restorative justice concerns. And please pardon me because my notes are extremely small on this. And I don't know if I can make them bigger. Thank you very much. I have no idea how PCs work, so thank you. All right. So when we are trying to explain deviance, most of the literature on deviance tries to explain how we can control and demotivate it. With deterrence theory, they tend to say, with the deterrence theorists, they say, we can stop people from being deviant by making the punishment after they do it big enough that they will be afraid to do it. Okay? We'll scare them into avoiding that cost. And with deterrence theory, most of the consequences for deviance tend to be institutionally imposed. They tend to be aimed at instrumental and physical freedom. So like, you can't leave the jail, we take away your money, you have to pay a fine. These are all instrumental kinds of freedoms. They have long-term severity that may never resolve. You know, you go to jail for 5 years, and when you get out, we don't call you a citizen. We call you an ex-con. It sort of follows you around like a tattoo on your forehead where you can never get rid of it. But the thing about the consequences in deterrence theory is that they are separated from the act. Okay, I commit a crime and I get caught 3 weeks later, and then I get brought to trial 4 months later, and then they finally impose the sentence 6 months later, and then at some point I go to jail. Am I going to remember what caused me to go to jail in the first place? I probably committed 4 other crimes between the time that I committed that crime and the time that I was caught, right? So we need to find some way to establish a connection between when you did the crime and what the punishment is. And our justice system actually does not allow for that because of due process. Because we insist on due process, that connection, that psychological connection between what I did and why I'm getting punished gets broken all the time. Legitimacy theory also says that deviance can be countered by imposing consequences, but these consequences tend to be group pressure. You know, we're going to shun you, we're going to shame you, we'll excommunicate you for a while, we'll tell you you can't be part of the group for a while, and those also may never resolve. Once you've got the reputation of being the black sheep, no one's going to trust you anymore, right? And these are also separated from the act by an extended period of time. So the problem is that once we have these consequences, you know, they don't actually join up with the problem. So then my question to you is, what about this missing dimension of time to consequence? I'm trying to make this click and it's just not doing it. Promptness of consequence. The literature dismisses it. It says celerity is not relevant, but one of my arguments here is that they're not operationalizing it very well. Okay? First, it's operationalized only. Consequences in the literature are only what the institutions put on you. Okay? It's never about the individual consequence of, I need food now. Or the individual consequence of, I am a heroin addict, and if I don't get my next fix, I'm going to go through painful and possibly fatal withdrawal in 6 hours. Those are immediate consequences. Nobody talks about those in the literature. They don't even see them as existing. They only look at the ones that we can impose as institutions on people who have deviated. And the other thing is that their time periods that they measure are much longer than is logically reasonable or feasible. They start with 1 month, and they end at 7 years. But what if celerity is measured in minutes or days instead of weeks or months? You know, if you catch the guy 1 couple of days after he does the crime, there's a good chance that he's going to feel the punishment more severely and more deeply than if we catch him, you know, 2 months after he did the crime or 2 years after he did the crime, right? And it never looks at, we never look at immediate consequences to the actor, but that may be the deciding factor in deviance, is that they are trying to deal with immediate consequences. They don't have the space necessary to look at long-term. They just don't. So my question is celerity a missing effect? Is it the thing that explains why deterrence theory and legitimacy theory generally don't work to explain how to stop people from committing crime in the first place? So my argument is, if you are feeling short-term pressures, or which have immediate consequences, meaning in the next couple of hours, that's going to lead to deviance, to try to alleviate those pressures. Which means that if you have long-term consequences for the deviance, that's not as important as fixing the problem that's in front of me right now. That's the important thing. Later will take care of itself. That's way over there. I don't need to worry about that right now, or I can't worry about that right now. I don't have the ability to focus that much. And this is where the restorative justice aspect comes in. We have to be compassionate about that. A person who is hungry, who doesn't have enough money to get their rent paid, or to have a place to live, if they're living on the street, they're facing stressors like maybe some kids are going to come by and torture the homeless guy and dump gasoline on him and set him on fire, which has happened many times in cities because it's funny. So that's a stressor none of us have to deal with. But if you're homeless, that's probably on your mind, right? If you are any kind of drug abuser or drug addict, you're going to be worrying about where to get your next fix, because if once what you have goes away, you're going to have withdrawals and reactions and all kinds of fun stuff. Okay, this kind of occupies your ability to think about the future, as in it blocks it off. It's like a dam. You can't see the water over there. You're too busy looking at the dam. That means that when we increase long-term pressures through the law, we're not doing anything. It's just for show. It's security theater. It's not doing anything to stop deviant people from being deviant. Why? Because they can't notice that we've just increased the consequence of what they're doing from 10 years in jail to 12 years in jail, like it's going to matter. They don't notice that. And the domain of immediate pressure has really not been considered in any meaningful way. And eventually I will figure out that that's where I need to click. Okay. When it comes to the literature, there is some literature about this immediate pressure issue. And one of them is, oh wait, did I skip a I'm going to skip the slide, I'm sorry. One of them is the idea of cognitive space. This goes to Miller in 1956. He wrote this amazing article called The Magical Number 7 plus or minus 2. And Miller was a psychologist, and he had done research on working memory, okay, on our immediate memory, kind of like our mental scratch pad, where we think about things like where I'm going to go to get dinner and what I have to do about this bill, you know, the immediate stuff. And what he found is that most of us have 7 spaces in our working memory that can be occupied by different things. And so if you have a stressor of, I need to get my fix, and you have another stressor of, I'm hungry because I haven't eaten in 18 hours or 2 days, and another stressor of, where am I going to sleep tonight so that I don't have to worry about kids dumping gasoline on me, and another stressor of, you know, the guy who sold me my drugs, he wants money, and how am I going to pay him off because he's going to kill me if I don't pay him. He has all of my numbers. The more of these spaces that get filled up, the less ability we have to pay attention to anything beyond that, because all of our working memory is taken up with these immediate issues and immediate pressures. The neurology of uncertainty also says that the brain regions that are associated with risky decisions, it shows that we are more sensitive to loss than we are to reward. So a lot of times deviants are not acting to get stuff, which is what, you know, other theories have said, you know, the reason that they deviate is because, this is the rational actor theory, they weigh the risk and the reward is bigger, so they're going after the reward. But that's not really the case. What it's actually turning out to be is they're trying to prevent risk, they're trying to prevent the immediate consequence, like withdrawal or starvation or freezing to death. That's why they're committing the crimes. It's not because they want to get something, it's because they want to avoid something. And our need to avoid is much bigger than our need to get, basically. We are more risk avoiders than we are reward seekers. So the rational actor theory is kind of disproved here. Uncertainty theory also says that the longer we have to live in a state of uncertainty, and when you're worrying about where's my next meal going to come from, where's my next fix going to come from, where am I going to sleep tonight, on a constant basis, you're living in a state of constant uncertainty. And uncertainty theory shows that the longer we have to live in uncertainty, the more likely we are to make those snap decisions to fix the short-term problems. We can't think about the long-term. And finally, discounting. This comes from economics. We tend to opt for the immediate need or consequence over the long-term consequence. If we have to look at them both, if there's both an immediate need right now and a long-term consequence if we meet that need, we're still going to meet that need more often than not. And especially, the research shows this happens when people are hungry, thirsty, sexually aroused, or in elevated emotional states. Stress is an elevated emotional state. A lot of the people who are committing these deviant acts are living in a state of constant stress, and yet we expect them somehow to be rational and think things through. This is not compassionate. So the data that I've got for you here, okay, the evidence that I've got for you here, we've got lots of lawbreakers' motives in the data, in the literature. Agnew recently reported that several of the people that he interviewed who were offenders reported that the main reasons they committed their crimes was because they needed money, they needed to retrieve their respect in the ghetto. That's incredibly important. James Gilligan did some work with very violent men who said the only time I feel alive is when I've got my respect. If I don't have my respect, I want to be dead. So this is seeming, you know, even if it's not an actual life or death situation, it's still perceived that way. So the need for money, the need for respect, and the need to solve disputes, meaning to win fights, okay, which is another form of needing respect. I need this to end now, and I need to be the winner in order to have my own self-respect back. These are all immediate needs. Well, when we look at lawmakers' motives, and this new data that I've got shows that the main motives lawmakers, or people who want laws enacted, have for criminalizing different acts are immediate danger of the act in question, monetary cost of the act in question, and other things that look an awful lot like immediate pressures. So when we look at how both lawmakers and lawbreakers are reacting to pressures, the pressures they're reacting to are always the right-in-your-face immediate kinds. So I conducted an online survey in spring of 2008, and I got 267 American adults, 18 and over, to respond, who had access to the internet. And it was a non-random sample. I understand that. It was a convenient sample. So everything here is just raw numbers. There's no statistical analysis going on here, because all I have is non-statistically, I can't do statistical analysis on this kind of data. But it was mainly done as a proof of concept exercise to see, are people who want to enact law, what are their motivations? I figured their motivations would be, you know, well, we want a better society, or we want long-term, and it turned out to not be that at all. It turned out to be just the same kind of motivations that offenders have for offending. And I asked them about 8 potentially deviant activities, and if you look at the first list and the second list here that say type of activity on the top, this is a list of the 8 things that I asked them about, and I said, okay, so this thing, gun ownership, should it be legal or illegal? And then whatever they responded, I asked them to explain why, so that I could get at the motivations for why. when you look at the results, and I'm just going to skip through my results here because there's a lot of them, and I'll just shift to my handout here. Okay. But when you look at the results, I've got them labeled here in this top type of activity by immediate needs, normative needs. Thank you. Immediate needs, normative needs, and instrumental needs. So instrumental is what the institution would do to you. Normative is what your group would do to you. And immediate is, I need food, water, shelter. Okay. Immediate pressures are threats to life, to physical integrity, to health, and to economic security. Okay. These needs that I have now. I need to be able to buy lunch today. Okay. I need to be able to get my fix today. I need a cigarette right now. These are immediate needs. Okay. The normative needs are what my group would think of me or how I can interact with my group or what they would do to me. And the instrumental needs are what the institution would do to me. Okay? Notice how almost everything that the lawmakers cited is sitting here in the immediate need category. The reasons why they wanted these things criminalized were overwhelmingly, this is something that's a threat to me right now. This is something that is a problem for me right now. And just to give a general example, if you look at panhandling, which to most of us doesn't seem very dangerous, overwhelmingly people said the reason they wanted it criminalized was because you're invading my personal space. That's the feeling of threat, right? If you don't mind, if I get right up in your face here, you're going to feel threatened. Even if I'm not a threat to you, you're going to feel threatened, right? So this, make them stop threatening me. Make them stay away from me. Okay, I want this criminalized so they can't make me feel threatened. That's an immediate need. It has no long-term institutional anything going on there, okay? When we look at gun ownership, overwhelmingly, it's a general danger. It's a public safety hazard. It's a health hazard. I don't want to get shot. I don't want my neighbor to get shot. I don't want my kid to get shot. These are all immediate needs about safety and physical health. And when we look at one more, the prostitution one, it's abusive, it's degrading, it's dangerous, it causes health risks for the people involved. Okay? This is an immediate need as well. This is not me talking about group pressures on me. This is not me talking about institutional problems. It's a problem because of what it does to people who are participating in it. The only one that didn't have a top-ranked reason, which was marijuana use, but health risks to user. Okay, we don't want them to smoke because it's bad for them. Okay, that's fine. We understand that. But most of these were immediate needs, immediate needs, immediate needs. Okay, things that I feel are personally threatening to me, and that's why I want it criminalized. Which means that criminals and lawmakers are acting from exactly the same kinds of pressures. Just like learning how to be a criminal is exactly the same as learning how to be a politician or learning how to do your times tables. There's no difference between the pressures that these groups are feeling. So the immediate pressures predominate. They are perceived as threats to life, to health, to safety, to bodily integrity. Yes, thank you. The decisions are always responses, or almost always responses, to perceived or actual immediate threats. And the operation of celerity in decision-making is that the immediate consequences get noticed and the long-term consequences get ignored. And so to conclude, and I really did practice this hard to make sure I could do this in 15 minutes, lawmakers or people who want to enact laws are also reacting to the same pressures. So why should we expect lawbreakers to be any different? But we do. This is not rational, and it's not compassionate. It's going against everything we know about restorative justice. You need to be compassionate to both parties in order to make things work. Now, we have constitutional protections against immediate sanctions because we have due process. So I can't just, grab this guy who stole something from my store and cut his hand off like they do in Saudi Arabia. That's not legal here, and we're not going to make it legal here. So how do we use this to understand what we can do? Well, as I'm certain many other presentations around this conference are proposing right now, we need to look at the things that cause the immediate stressors in the first place. We need to reduce poverty in communities. We need to increase employment opportunities in communities. We need to create rent control so that people are not quite so migratory and so transitory, so that you can trust your neighbors, so you can build collective efficacy, so that you can have community cohesion. But it starts with the understanding that restorative justice depends on increasing empathy in the offender. And if the offender's brain is occupied with, I need my fix, I need food, I need a place to sleep where I won't get set on fire, I need to make sure that I pay my bookie, they're not going to have the cognitive space necessary to have empathy at all. We can have this guy sit at a conference and say, you really hurt me. And have him say, I'm really sorry, I didn't realize I hurt you. And that'll last until he goes out the door. And then when he goes out the door, he needs food again, he needs shelter again, he needs water again, he needs his fix again, he needs to deal with this bookie again, he needs to find a place to sleep again. We have fixed nothing. Restorative justice may work in the short term, but I think in order to fix the long-term problems, we have to have some way to say, look, we've got to be able to build empathy for them so that they can build empathy for us. And that's my point.
Okay, so we have time for questions now.